Hey there, this is Kamal, and in this video we'll be learning about GitHub Actions. We'll try to understand what GitHub Actions is and how it differs from Jenkins. We'll also understand the main underlying concept of GitHub Actions and how we can leverage the power of GitHub Actions to automate some simple tasks inside our project. So with that out of the way, let's get this started. Alright, so first things first, what is GitHub Actions? So GitHub Actions is a kind of a tool that you can use to automate some tasks which will take a lot of time if you have to do them manually. So let's say you want to do some formatting checks that will say that these are the guidelines and rules that your code has to follow. Then that check, if you have to do manually for every PR that you raise, it's going to take a lot of time. And let's say you want to do some checks before merging something to a main branch. Even then, doing that for every single PR request that was raised when you're in a big organization, it's going to be really difficult, right? Automating these kinds of tasks is handled by GitHub Actions. So the main advantage of using GitHub Actions over Jenkins is both of them automate few kinds of workflows. So basically CI/CD is one of the examples of workflows. Like Jenkins is specifically dedicated towards CI/CD, but it can do some other workflows automations as well. Whereas Jenkins is not specifically created for CI/CD, but it can also do CI/CD workflows, right? So CI/CD is just one example of workflow which you can do through GitHub Actions. So a simple use case is, let's say whenever a PR is raised from your dev branch to your master branch, or from your testing branch to your master branch, then what you can do is that you can run some predefined checks using, like, let's say pretty or something like that, that will check for any syntactical errors. Then you can build your project. Let's say if you have an Angular based project, then you can build it using npm, then create a Docker image of that, then upload that Docker image to a Docker hub. This is just one use case. Apart from this, there are multiple use cases and multiple steps or multiple actions and automations that you can do using GitHub Actions. So there are two key features that you have to understand when it comes to GitHub Actions. One is events and the second one is actions. So event is something like a trigger. For example, somebody has joined the organization for the first time, then whenever they raise their first pull request or whenever they log in and do some kind of push or something like that, you can give a hello message or something like that. Or whenever, let's say, you want to raise a pull request from some branch to another branch, that is an event. Again, or let's say you push your code to some branch, that is another event. So these are triggers, and whenever this trigger happens, you can do some set of steps, right? That is your workflow. That workflow has predefined steps that will happen. Let's say, for example, in my workflow, I've said first run prettier, which will check for formatting errors, then build my code using npm, then create a Docker image for that, then push that to an online Docker Hub repository. These are series of steps. So that is your workflow, and that is your action, right? So for every event, there is a corresponding action that can be performed. That is the main concept inside of GitHub Actions. Alright, so with the theory part out of the way, let's try to jump into the code and see how we can actually do that on a sample project. Alright, so for now what I'll do is I'll create a new empty project. So let's click on new. In here, let's give it as GitHub Actions. I'll keep it as public. Let's not create a new README file and click on create repository. Now the repository is ready. So there is an action tab here, right? So whenever we have some code inside the actions tab, you can go to this tab and do some actions. So before actually pushing the code here, let's first go and see what are the sample actions that we have. There are some predefined actions already present for you to work with. Like, let's say deploying your code to Amazon ECS or deploying your Node.js to Azure or something like that, right? So there are some simple ones as well as some really big ones. Like, let's say like greet users who are first time contributors to the repository. So if you enable this, whenever somebody raises a pull request or contributes for the first time, automatically they'll be getting greeting. Or you can label your pull requests, or let's say you can remove all your stale issues or pull requests, right? So it checks for that. So these are some automations that you can do, which you don't need to do manually as a developer, right? So you can explore onto this and see what you can configure. But for now, let's create a new action and see how we can work with it. So our end goal is to first build our application using npm, then create a Docker image for that, then push that Docker image to Docker Hub. So that is our end goal, right? So let's go back to code. Now let's open a new terminal instance. In here, let's create a new Angular project. So I'll type in ng new, give space, GitHub Actions. Let's click on enter. So you can select the type of style sheet. So I'll be using CSS. I'll select that, and it's asking whether I want SSR or SSG. I'll keep it as no for now. We just want a simple website. Alright, so once that has been done, let's go into the project. So let's open. Alright, so once you have opened the project inside of VS Code, let's create a new terminal instance and let's push the code to GitHub. So I'll first link this to my GitHub repository. So let's go to GitHub and let's link that. Git. Once it has been linked, let's push the code. Alright, so with that we have pushed the code. Let's go back and check. Let's refresh the page. Okay, so we have some data here. This is just a basic Angular project, right? Alright, so now let's go to the Actions tab and see what we can configure. So there are a lot of predefined templates, right? So we'll just try to take the base from there and write our code on top of that. So I'll just search for Node from here. Now there are a lot of options. So what I'll do is I'll go with this one. I'll just try to build and test Node.js application. So let's try to click on configure. Now in here, let's try to understand the syntax. So before that, if you look at the top, you'll see that there's a file name. So as of now, whenever you create a new workflow, that will be saved inside of .github folder. Inside of that, there's a new folder called as workflows, and inside that you have the file. And this file is following the YAML syntax. That is why we have the extension .yml. Now what I'll do is I'll change this name to build and publish, because that's our end goal. Inside here you can give a name for this, so I'll give it as build and publish to Locker Hub. So you can give whatever you want. Alright, so now what I'll do is let's try to understand the syntax here. There is something that we have already discussed, right? So whenever an event is triggered, automatically an action should happen. So in this case, our events is going to be a push or a pull. So basically on every push to the main branch, execute this, or on every pull request created to the branch main, execute this. Or you can specify a dev branch as well. Like let's say I can give it as whenever a push happens to the dev branch or whenever a pull happens to the dev branch, automatically execute this particular workflow. So in this case, I'll just leave it as main. So whenever a new pull request is created from some individual branch to our main branch, this will execute, right? So it is serving our purpose. Now what we want to do, this is the job section, right? What we want to do inside of this, we want to build. And what is that build? Whenever that push or pull request happens, we want to build our application. Now, whenever we build something, it should be there inside of an environment, right? Like let's say if you want to build your Node application, it should be generally built inside of a server. So in this case, what happens is whenever you initiate this process, automatically GitHub will take the OS that you specify here and it will create an instance of it and it will run that job inside of that instance. In this case, it will run our build process inside of a Ubuntu system, right? It will run on Ubuntu system. That is what it's specifying here. And it is saying that for the Node version, you can use any of these versions. It will try with this. Since our project is based on the latest one and I'm using 18 internally, I'll just remove 14 and 16 because without few packages which are there inside of 18 will not work on 14, right? So I just don't want that to happen. So I'll keep it as 18. If you want, you can remove this matrix since it's going to be a single version. But for now, let's keep it as it is. Alright, now inside of this, what it's doing is it's executing some steps, right? And each step has users and name. Okay. Alright, so now let's understand what's happening here. So basically, whenever you initiate the build process, your build will happen on a Ubuntu system and it's going to use the Node latest, that is not latest, but the 18th version of it. And it's going to execute a few steps. And the first step it's going to do is it's going to check out to your branch. As you can see here, this command is specifying actions/checkout, right? So basically, whenever that happens, we want to check out to the specified branch and then do some operations, right? Like say you want to create a pull request from master, not from master. You want to create a pull request from dev to master. Then you have to check out to the dev branch and do some operations. Checking out to that branch will include git checkout and the branch name. That's a command, right? A lot of people will try to build applications, right? That's a process that's being done by a lot of people on GitHub. And it's a recurring process and most probably it's going to remain same for everybody. So for things which are already used by a lot of people and which will not change that much, there are few actions that are already predefined by GitHub itself. One such action is checking out to your desired branch. So here action/checkout is basically an action, which is basically a repository wherein it's already been defined. So if I open this, if you open Google and search for that, you'll see that there is already a GitHub repository called as actions. Inside that, there's already one called as checkout, right? So it's already been written. Okay, this is the checkout version. The code for checking out your specific repository inside of GitHub has already been written by somebody else, and that is part of an action. You just have to use that action, right? You don't need to rewrite the logic for checking out your branch. So that is what we are doing here. We are using an action already predefined, and we are using the v3 version of it, right? Now after that, you have to give a name. So this name is basically description of what you're doing. Inside that, you're going to use another action called setup-node, and the v3 version of it, which is basically gonna set up your node inside of your server, right? This is a recurring action, that's why it's already been predefined. And it's actually using the matrix version here. So if you don't want that to happen, you can just remove this from here and you can give the 18th version of it, right? You don't need to use a matrix, like you don't have a multiple versions, right? You just have a single version. Apart from that, once these steps are done, you have to first use the command called npm-ci. This is basically equivalent to npm install, but the reason why people use ci is whenever you use something like an automation software, using CI is much more beneficial. There are a few differences between install and CI. If you're interested in that, you can Google it up really quick. But yeah, for in this case, we'll just leave it as it is. Now, once all the dependent packages have been installed using this command, we'll run the build command, and there's a flag here saying if present. So if our code has a build script, then automatically that will be run. After that is done, it's going to run the test script. In this case, we don't want to run the test script. We'll just stop it till here, right? So this is what's written here. Now you can extend onto this and write your own things as well. But for now, let's keep it as it is and let's try to see if it's working or not. Right, let's try to commit the changes. And now what I'll do is I'll create a new branch. I'll give the branch name as dev. So I'll be raising a pull request from dev branch to the main branch. And since our logic is saying whenever a pull request is raised to main branch, automatically trigger the workflow, this will also trigger that workflow. So let's click on propose changes. These are the changes, right? So let's click on create the pull request. Okay, as you can see, as soon as I do that, it's going to say some checks haven't completed yet, and it's trying to do those checks. So let's click on details. Now, as you can see, it is doing some operations. Okay, it has set up the job that is going into your branch and checking out to that specific branch. Then it has run the checkout. Then it has installed node into your system. Then it has run the npm-ci command. Then it has run the build command. Then after that, it has cleared out the cache and everything, and the job is now completed. As you can see, all these things are done. If I now go back to my pull request, you'll see all the checks have passed, right? So these are the checks that happened on our code. And that happened because we have raised a pull request from our branch to the main branch. Now, since our checks are passed, you can merge the pull request if you want. Right, so now let's extend onto this and let's try to do our end goal. That is, after your build has happened, you want to create a Docker image out of it, and then you have to publish that to Docker Hub as well. So for that, there is already an action predefined. You also don't need to write an action again. If you want, what you can do is that you can go to that thing. So let's go back to code, and in here, you're right now in the main branch and there is nothing here. But if I now go to dev branch, you'll see that there is a new folder called GitHub workflows, and inside of that, we have our YAML file. In here, all the actions are written, right? So now what you can do is that you can actually extend onto this. You can write all the Docker commands to actually build an image and push it to Docker Hub. But since an action is already defined, you can reuse that action. So let's open a new tab and let's type in Docker build and push GitHub actions. So there's already one inside of Docker marketplace. So let's open that. So this is the action that we're going to use. So if you scroll down, there are multiple locations to which you can push. You can push to Docker Hub or GCR or AWS, all those things, right? So now let's try to see the basic version. So these are the arguments that you have to pass. So let's scroll down. All right, in the example section, we have one example for Docker Hub. Let's copy this snippet. Let's go back to our page and let's edit this. Okay, so now inside the steps, I'll segregate this a bit. I'll give a space here so that we can understand what's happening. Okay, let's give another space and let's paste what we have just copied. Since we are following the YAML syntax, everything should be indented correctly. So if you don't know the YAML syntax, there are a lot of crash courses on YouTube. Just go through one which is really short and you'll be able to really easily understand what's YAML and how you can use that. Alright, so now here, there are a few things that you have to understand. You have to first give the image name. Okay, it's going to be your Docker Hub repository and then your image name. And the registry is going to remain same, that is docker.io. And then you have to give your username and password. Using this, it's going to connect to your Docker Hub account and then push that image. In order to understand what these terms do and whether you can add few more options here, you can go back to the page, and if you scroll to the top, you'll see these are variables or options that you can add onto your workflow, right? So, okay, now let's add this particular image. So let's log into Docker Hub. If you don't have an account, it's really easy. Just sign up for a new account on Docker Hub. And once you sign up to an account, you can create a new repository. Okay, in this case, I can give it as something like GitHub-actions. You can keep it as public or you can keep it as private as well, and you can have up to 1 private repositories, right? So as of now, I already have a repository created, which is GitHub-actions. So I'll open that. This is my name for my repository. So as you can see, I've already published a few images, that is during the test phase. So yeah, let's go back, and here I'll replace this with my actual one. So it's going to be packetcode official /GitHub-actions. So this is the actual image path. Right, so now that is done. The remaining thing is to create a username and password. So basically, username and password are sensitive information, so you cannot directly hardcode that here. Instead, what you can do is that you can create a secret for this particular repository and keep the password and username there, and you can use that inside of your file. So in order to do that, what we can do is that we can open settings and you can go to code security and analysis. Okay, not that. You can go to secrets and variables. In here, if you go to actions, here you can create secrets specific to this particular repository. So now what I'll do is I'll create a new secret. Let's go back and let's copy this. That is the secret's name. I'll paste it here. Inside this, I'll type in the username. So my username is going to be packetcode official. So I'll add that as a secret. Similarly, I'll create the password as well. Alright, so once your password and username have been created, you can use that inside of your GitHub workflows using secrets.so-and-so name. And this is the syntax of YAML to specify that this is an environment variable and you're using that, right? Okay, so now let's keep that as it is and let's try to build and see what's happening. I'll create a new commit and I'll push that commit directly to dev branch. Since you already have a PR, automatically a new workflow should be triggered. So if I now go back here, if I go to actions tab, you'll see that the workflow has been triggered. Now let's open that. Let's go to the build that has started. So it is trying to set up that job. It has tried to complete the job and it was successful with npm CI and build, but it failed at the Docker build. It is saying that there is no Docker file which is existing at this particular location. And that is true, we don't have a Docker file. So now what I'll do is I'll go back to the code. Let's open a new terminal instance and let's first check out to the dev branch. Seems like we have to update the repository remote. So let's do that. Now let's check out the dev. So now that we are on the dev branch, let's try to create a new Docker file here. So let's create. Now inside of this Docker file, I'll just write some simple commands. So I'll be using Nginx stable, the latest stable version of Nginx, and I'll be copying my build code from this particular folder to this particular folder inside of the Docker image. So basically, if you observe here, I'm not trying to build my project using Docker because GitHub Actions is already doing that inside of Ubuntu server. What I want to do is once that has been built, a dist folder will be created and the code will be there inside of this particular folder. I just want to copy whatever is there here to this particular location inside of the image, that is inside of the Docker image container, right? So that is what I want to do. So I'll open the terminal instance once again. I'll try to add this particular thing to my commit once again. So let's create a new commit. Let's push that, and I'll be doing a force push because I want to add this onto my dev branch, and automatically, since you already have a pull request from dev branch to that, and since I've already written the logic saying that trigger the workflow on a push as well, automatically the workflow should be triggered, and as you can see, that has been done. Let's open that workflow and let's try to see the logs here. So as of now, npm CI has been done. npm build is being run right now. Once that is done, it is trying to build the Docker image, and it has built the Docker image, and it has pushed the Docker image to our repository, right? Okay, the job is successful. If I go back to the actions, you can see that this job is successful. Now let's go to Docker Hub. So you can see that this was done 2 hours ago, right? So let's refresh. As you can see, it was pushed a few seconds ago. So this is our latest image. Now you can use this image on your local system or any other system that you want, and your project is now there on that system as well. So in this way, you can actually use GitHub's actions to push your code to any repository that you want, or you can automate some other things as well. As of now, as you can see, we are running this on a Ubuntu system. If you want, you can use the same strategy and not just run it on Ubuntu. You can also run it on Windows, or you can run it on Mac or any of such operating systems. So you can do that, and not just for dev branch. Whenever you create a push request to any other branch as well, you can trigger this, and not just CI/CD. You can also do linting checks, or you can do formatting checks as well. So let's try to see how we can do that. So I'll click on the icon again. As you can see, there's a marketplace here, right? So let's try to search for Prettier. Okay, so whenever I search for Prettier, you'll see there are a lot of already available automation tasks that I can use. So these are all the actions. So you can see that this action and this actions are pretty famous, right? They've also given the way that you can use this. So you can just copy that and paste that here as one of the steps. And whenever the push or pull happens to the main branch, then this will be triggered and your Prettier action will be run, and it's going to check for formatting errors. If anything is not correct, automatically the build process will fail, and it's going to say that some of the checks have not passed and your pull request is not ready to be merged to the main branch. In this way, you can identify any errors even before merging that to the main branch, and the developer himself can fix that issue. Alright, so that is how you can use GitHub Actions to automate workflows which are useful for developers, which will mitigate their manual tasks and improve the efficiency as well. So I hope you have understand how you can use GitHub Actions and how you can use this on your own projects as well. So that's it for this video, guys. I hope you have liked what you've seen till now. If you did, then please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe as well. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.